Resuming debate, the Honourable Member for Fredericton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'll be splitting my time with the member from Don Valley East. Mr. Speaker, I'm proud to rise in the House today to endorse a motion that supports the government's decision to broaden, improve, and redefine Canada's contribution to the effort to combat ISIL. This decision will help better leverage Canadian expertise and complement the work of our coalition partners to ensure maximum effect.
I am also proud to express my gratitude and my pride in the members of the Canadian Armed Forces and the diplomatic staff for their participation in the fight against terrorism. I also would like to thank Canadian humanitarian relief and aid workers for their efforts in offering essential aid to those who have been affected by the conflict. I also reaffirm my support for the continued engagement of our country in supporting the coalition against ISIL.
This decision, Mr. Speaker, will refocus our military contribution by expanding the advise and assist mission of the Canadian Armed Forces in Iraq. It will significantly increase intelligence capabilities in Iraq and theater-wide and see the deployment of CAF medical personnel. It will enhance capacity-building efforts with our defense partners in Jordan and Lebanon to advance regional stability. And it will see the withdrawal of our CF-18s while we maintain Air Force surveillance and refueling capability. Mr. Speaker, this decision will help improve the living conditions of those affected by the conflict and help to build the foundations for long-term regional stability, including in Lebanon and Jordan. It will lead to significant investments in humanitarian assistance and an enhanced role for experienced humanitarian partners working to support the basic needs of conflict-affected populations, including children and victims of sexual and gender-based violence.
This will allow us to maintain more effective relationships with political leaders throughout the region. It will increase our contribution to the international effort to find political solutions to the crisis that affects the region. It will help us to strengthen our diplomatic presence to facilitate the implementation of improved programs. The decision supports an augmentation or an increase in the Canadian Armed Forces deployment, will strengthen dialogue with local and international partners on the ground, and generally gives Canada greater influence in the region.
And, Mr. Speaker, this decision will see us complete our goal of welcoming tens of thousands of Syrian refugees to Canada. Mr. Speaker, last month, constituents throughout Fredericton, New Maryland, Oromocto, and the Grand Lake region were proud to welcome home troops leading Operation Provision, an important part of this whole-of-government approach to combat ISIL. On January 12th, in the wee hours of the morning, 58 soldiers returned to 5th Canadian Division Support Base Gagetown after working in Beirut and Amman to process Syrian refugees destined to Canada. These military personnel spent months supporting staff from the Department of Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship, aiding with security patrol, data entry, and with medical screenings.
I am very proud to see the contribution of our soldiers to this operation. When they returned in January, I was equally happy to see them reunited with their family and colleagues. We must all thank these women and men for their service and congratulate them for their work.
Speaker, we cannot understate the tremendous effect that this nationwide community resettlement effort has had on the now over 21,000 Syrian refugees that have come to us as vulnerable global citizens. As has been recognized numerous times by the Minister of Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship, my home province of New Brunswick, and the riding I have the honor to represent, Fredericton, have punched well above their weight in this resettlement effort. New Brunswick has now welcomed nearly 1,000 new residents, and I'm proud to say that Fredericton boasts now of 400 new community members. The leadership and support of our military, our community resettlement agencies, and the outpouring of generosity and support from everyday citizens in Fredericton and clear across this country has been nothing short of inspiring, outstanding, and heartwarming. All of these community leaders deserve our gratitude for their tireless efforts. C'est sûr, Monsieur.
Now, it's certain, Mr. Speaker, that in the context of this government decision, the role of our military efforts will remain important in creating the necessary conditions to continue fighting ISIL.
5th Canadian Division Support Base Gagetown, Canada's largest military training base and home to some 6,000 military and civilian personnel, will surely play a leading role in the mission to defeat ISIS, deliver increased stability to the region, and develop capacity for local good governance, peace, and security. Consisting of 2 large formations and numerous larger units, the Combat Training Center at Base Gagetown is organized around 5 distinct training schools: armor, artillery, infantry, tactics, and military engineering. Mr. Speaker, as Canada triples the size of its train, assist, and advise mission to help Iraqi security forces plan and conduct military operations against ISIL, the expertise and sophistication delivered from our women and men in uniform, many of whom will have passed through Base Gagetown, will prove essential and vital to efforts. Ces personnels des forces.
This Canadian Armed Forces personnel will offer very needed expertise in operational planning, targeting, and intelligence. Canadian Armed Forces medical personnel will offer training to the Iraqi security forces to help take care of those wounded on the battlefield. And our personnel will look at ways to improve tactical transport in the theater of operations.
Mr. Speaker, another key objective of this government's whole-of-government strategy is to promote security and stability. Canada's efforts will help prevent the spread of violent extremism by enhanced capacity-building efforts with security forces in Jordan and Lebanon. Parmi les autres initiatives,
Among the other various security initiatives of the Government of Canada, we note a sum of $145 million over the next 3 years for counter-terrorism initiatives, for stabilization programs, and for security programs. And, Mr. Speaker, Canada will continue its efforts to support capacity building and the training of security forces and organizations responsible for ensuring that the law is applied. We will continue to fight the flow of foreign fighters, and we will prevent ISIL from getting access to further funding.
experienced partners to deliver $840 million in humanitarian assistance over the next 3 years to support the basic needs of those hardest hit by the conflict, including children and survivors of sexual and gender-based violence. Canada will also deliver $270 million over the next 3 years to build local capacity to provide basic social services, enhance infrastructure, and help with accountable governance. La nouvelle approche du Canada.
Canada's new approach also includes the priority of increasing Canada's diplomatic role
To address the ongoing crisis in Iraq and Syria and the impact they are having on the surrounding region will make a meaningful contribution to the global coalition's fight against the Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant. It will help strengthen the ability of regional governments and local authorities to defend themselves and allow them to rebuild over the long term. It is a whole-of-government approach that enlists several federal departments to work closely together to enhance security and stability, provide vital humanitarian assistance, and help partners deliver social services, rebuild infrastructure, and help with good governance. It is a whole-of-government approach that requires the ongoing leadership of hardworking citizens of the riding of Fredericton, including men and women in uniform who pass through Base Gagetown. It is a whole-of-government approach that I am proud to support. Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Questions et commentaires?
Questions and comments?
I believe it's Peace River Westlock.
That is correct. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank my honourable colleague for his comments there. As a proud Canadian, I'm always proud of our efforts around the world in our ability to bring in refugees from around the world, and I'm always proud to say that we're helping the most vulnerable. But yesterday, in the committee, there was a committee hearing on this, and we were informed that almost none of the refugees that we've brought in have actually come from any of the camps that we see all the time on television. So I was just wondering if the member could comment, are we in fact taking in the most vulnerable when we're taking in these refugees? Thank you.
L'honorable député
The
de...
honourable member for Fredericton.
Mr. Speaker, let me say that it's been one of the greatest privileges that I've ever had to witness the coming together of the community of Fredericton and the welcoming of some 400 individuals and a number of families who have come to us as Syrian refugees. These people have arrived and told us their stories of having come from deplorable situations and about how well received and how welcome they have felt by those in the community. I don't think we can underestimate the situation that many of these refugees have found themselves in over the last number of years and how important a role Canada has to play in welcoming these refugees, as well as helping our Lebanese and Jordanese partners in helping accommodate refugees in camps over in that part of the world. It's about providing humanitarian assistance and compassion and relief to individuals, but also providing some assistance to those who are carrying a heavy shoulder in this refugee effort in that region of the world. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. Questions and comments?
Courtney Alberni.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I want to thank the honourable member for his speech and who I know is a proud Canadian. Given that the Liberals have gone on the record and stated that Canada should not have a combat role, how can they guarantee Canadian troops will not face combat in their new advise and assist role? And will the Liberals acknowledge that their claims of Canada's new military role in Iraq being non-combat is actually unrealistic and that their plan puts our troops at even greater risk?
The honourable member for Fredericton.
Mr. Speaker, as a government and as parliamentarians, we have a duty to ensure that we look out for our men and women in uniform and that we make informed decisions when we send them into conflict zones. The men and women who pass through base Gagetown, just on the outskirts of the Oromocto community in the riding I have the honour to represent, receive some of the best training delivered to any military personnel in the world. It's this sort of training, this sort of expertise, this sort of sophistication that our military women and men are going to be bringing overseas to help capacitate Iraqi forces, to help deliver some added stability to the region. I'll also mention the huge humanitarian assistance effort that goes along as part of this whole of government approach to helping be a part of the coalition to take down what is an evil force in the world in ISIL. Canada has an important role to play in this, and I have the utmost respect and confidence in our women and men in uniform to represent us so well overseas and to do the job that we as parliamentarians and Canadians have tasked them with doing. Merci beaucoup.
Questions et commentaires. The honourable
Questions and comments?
Egg North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I appreciate the comments from the member. You know, if you listen to many of the Conservatives speak on this, you get the impression that Canada has to 100% participate by having F-18s involved. If they're not engaged, then the Canadian Forces is not doing its job. And we went through an election in which we had a very clear platform on the issue, indicating that, yes, the Canadian Forces can participate and be engaged, but we don't need to have the F-18s. And I'm wondering if the member can just provide his thoughts in regards to when he was knocking on doors. My constituents that I represent today are quite happy with the fact that Canada will play a role, and we can play a role without the F-18s.
Honourable député de Fredericton.
The honourable member for Fredericton.
My colleague for the question. I think it is blatantly irresponsible for the opposition, the Conservative opposition, to suggest that this is one slim element that Canada has to play in the international fight against ISIL. As I mentioned, and having walked through Oromocto time and time again over the spring, summer, and in the fall, that community and the base Gagetown community that has grown up around that has so much to offer to Canadians and to Canada's international efforts, whether it be in diplomacy, whether it be in leading in humanitarian assistance, whether it be in leading in the type of military training effort that they are going to undertake over these next number of years as part of this Operation Impact. And I know that people in the riding that I have the honour to represent right across Canada are proud of our women and men in uniform.
Reprise du débat, resuming.